think politics in America is hopelessly divided, you ain't seen nothing. Unless you happen to be living in Minnesota. Welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number. I'm your co-host Sarah, and as always, joined by the ever-knowledgeable Stephen.
Thanks, Sarah. So today we're doing something a little bit different. So rather than looking at a particular bill, which is what we normally do, or a collection of bills, we're talking about a whole state. And we've got quite the story about the unusual start to the legislative session in the land of 10,000 lakes, of course. As you say, we're talking about Minnesota. You might want to grab a coffee for this one, Sarah. It's quite the political puzzle.
I've already got mine right here, Stephen. And before we dive into things, let's just talk a little bit about Minnesota. So if all of you haven't noticed yet, my family is from there. I do have a slight Minnesotan accent, but work hard to keep that one under control because a Minnesotan and a British accent on one podcast, that's just too much to handle. But my dad is from there, and he grew up just outside the cities. So the cities is the Twin Cities, which are Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's where the capital is. It's kind of the suburban hub. But most of Minnesota is actually farmland. And my dad grew up on a corn farm that was actually only 20 minutes from downtown St. Paul. Now it is a huge development. It's, urban sprawl, all of that.
So tell us, what's the most interesting thing about Minnesota? I've never been there. I know nothing about Minnesota.
Yeah, there is Babe the Blue Ox. Love Babe the Blue Ox. If you've ever been to Bemidji, you've been to the statue, biggest Babe the Blue Ox, and Paul Bunyan statue in the state. Very important. But the Minnesota State Fair is one of the coolest things that happens in Minnesota. It's one of the best state fairs in all of the land. And actually, my favorite thing is that my grandpa is a very, very accomplished yodeler. He has many CDs, and he's very cool. He's a little tiny Norwegian man who yodels the cattle call from, being on the farm. And I was showing people this interview of him at the State Fair a few years ago where he was yodeling and kind of getting like a special little performance. And Senator Amy Klobuchar actually retweeted about my grandpa and his yodeling. And so, claim to fame over here for the Johnsons and my grandpa's yodeling. And it's very cool.
Well, that sounds great. Can you give us a rendition of his yodel? Can you do it? Or is it
you know what? I'll splice in a video of him at the end of this podcast with his, because I will do him a disservice. But he's really good.
All right. Okay.
What's great about Minnesota is it's a lot of family values there. It's an amazing place where people really come together, have community. It's so different. Whenever I'm there, I'm always going to the VFW with my grandpa and dancing and playing bingo. And it's just very different from my life in Colorado. And, it's cold. It's full of mosquitoes also in the summer. You cannot go outside during dusk or you will be eaten alive. And then in the winter, they have tunnels in the city that you don't have to go outside, but you can get around the city because it's often like negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit there. So it is freezing and full of Scandinavian people.
Okay. Well, I've certainly learned a lot of new things. Maybe I should give Minnesota a go. So Babe the Blue Ox. When I think of Babe, I always think of a pig. But now when I hear Babe, I'll think of Babe the Blue Ox.
Yes.
Well, so Sarah, the reason we're talking about Minnesota today, though, is that something's happening that's quite unprecedented in Minnesota's political history. So both chambers of the legislature are dealing with what you could refer to as a power uncertainty. So let's start with the Senate, which wasn't even up for election, but is somehow in the midst of a major election drama.
A major election drama? How did that happen?
Well, so the Senate was operating with a narrow Democratic majority last year, but two major events changed everything. So first of all, Senator Kelly Morrison resigned after winning a seat in Congress. She was then replaced by Ann Johnson Stewart, which kept the narrow Democratic majority intact. But then, and this is where things got really complicated, Senate Majority Leader Kari Jejic sadly passed away in late December.
Oh my gosh, that is terrible. How has that affected the Senate's operations?
Well, obviously everyone was quite shocked, but also it's created an exact 33-33 split between the Democrats and the Republicans, forcing them into a temporary power-sharing agreement. So they're basically taking turns at the gavel until a special election on January 28th to fill the vacant seat.
But that's not the only drama in the Senate, right?
No, not not by a long shot. There's also the case of Senator Nicole Mitchell, who's facing trial on burglary charges from last spring. And her trial was supposed to start on January the 27th, but it's been pushed back. And so that's causing quite a stir about whether she'd actually be allowed to vote on legislation at all.
Okay, and then from what I've also heard, there's a complicated situation happening in the House that might be even more complicated than all of this.
Yes, yes. If you had one chamber that was going through all of these shenanigans and all these ructions, then that would be bad enough. But the House situation is even worse. So the November election initially resulted in a perfect 67-67 tie between the parties, which is insane, right? How can you have a state where both chambers are exactly split down the middle? And they were actually working on a power sharing agreement. So again, you'd have had a power sharing agreement in both of those chambers. But then things got really interesting.
You know, I do have to say it's a good thing that Minnesotans are known as nice, agreeable people, but I can't wait to hear what has happened.
Well, the Democratic winner in District 40B, Roosevelt, was deemed ineligible to serve due to residency issues. So all of a sudden, Republicans had a 67-66 majority. So they immediately cancelled the power sharing agreement and elected their own leadership.
Well, it's good to know that politics do prevail, even Minnesota values. But okay, so I'm sure that the Democrats aren't just, taking this lying down. What are they doing?
Definitely not. So they've basically gone on strike. And so all of the Democrat legislators just aren't turning up to the House. And they argued that the state constitution requires 68 members for a quorum. So therefore, there's no quorum and that the House actually can't meet. So they're just refusing to show up. Now, the thing is, though, there's a little bit of a conflict here because the Constitution, the state constitution of Minnesota, doesn't actually say that you require 68 members for a quorum. It says you require 68 members to pass legislation. And so, obviously, you could argue that the House can meet and it can do its business and it can send stuff to committee and it can debate and discuss. As long as it doesn't actually try and pass any legislation, then it could still function. Obviously, the Democrats would disagree with that.
Well, also, that just kind of sounds like a normal state house and Senate not passing any legislation.
Well,
there's something weird going on here. Just kidding. But okay, it sounds like the courts might be getting involved now.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So there are multiple legal challenges in play. And there's the timing of the special election in Roseville, questions about the House Republican leadership's legitimacy. Should they really declare that they're the majority when there's this vacant seat? And even there's a disputed election in Shakopee where 20 absentee ballots went missing. Now, normally 20 absentee ballots wouldn't be a problem, but the Democratic majority in Shakopee was 14 votes. So these 20 missing ballots could actually swing the election the other way.
Okay, how is Governor Walz handling this chaos? He went from the election trail now to this. Oh my God.
Yes, he did. He's had a busy time of it. He's having a busy time, isn't he? He's probably sat there thinking, I should actually be in Washington right now, sat in the White House. But anyway, so he's back from his presidential campaign run, and he's trying to focus on his legislative agenda, getting back to Minnesota. And he's taken a very firm stance, like he won't recognize the House as constitutionally organized, and he's even ordered state agency staff not to participate in any of the Republican-led hearings.
Oh my gosh, this sounds like it could really impact some important state business. What should Minnesotans be watching for?
Well, the big deadline to watch is July the 1st. So it's quite a way away, but hopefully things will be sorted by then. But that's when the next fiscal biennium starts, and they need to pass a 2-year budget before then. So there's a lot of work to be done over the coming months to pass this budget.
And could this affect the budget deadline?
Well, possibly. But there's obviously a strong motivation on all sides to avoid that scenario. Minnesota actually faced a government shutdown in 2011, and that was sort of a terrible situation. And so nobody wants a repeat of that.
Yes, my cousin's boyfriend is the handyman for all of the public buildings in the cities, so definitely don't want that
Wow.
for him.
No,
But
definitely
yeah,
not.
yeah. I mean, before we wrap up, what's your take on how all of this might play out?
Well, the special election in Roseville will be absolutely crucial. So the Dems are expected to win this one, and if they do, we're back to a 67-67 tie in the House, which not ideal, but at least then we're back to this situation where there would need to be a power sharing agreement. But there are so many legal challenges in play that we might not see a clear resolution of any of this kind of stuff for weeks or even months. So the courts will likely end up playing a major role in whatever solution is actually worked out in the end.
Well, thank you, Stephen. This has been quite the civics and drama lesson today.
Absolutely. So, always a pleasure. And to our listeners, stay tuned. This story is far from over.
Okay, well, that's it for today. Stay tuned for my grandpa yodeling.
Oh, oodly, 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 oodly.
Thanks for breaking it all down, Stephen. And thanks to all you for tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Bill Number. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share your thoughts, particularly if you're living in Minnesota right now.